Hey, a big part of my career happened between 2005 and 2009 when I was doing a lot of website interface animation in Adobe Flash. That's why I decided to start a series in which I share my love of animation and all my tips, tricks and techniques that I've learned over the years with you. We'll start with the basics using Figma Smart Animate, and after that we'll transition to some other more flexible and more powerful tools. Let's start from the beginning. Animation is basically a transition from state A to state B, or from state 1 to state 2. And that transition can be anything from position, color, rotation, size, and many more different properties. Today let's create a couple of transitions for each state. Okay, let's start by creating a new design file, and we're gonna call it Animation Basics. I'm gonna start by creating a new frame that's gonna be like, let's say 600 by 600. Okay, perfect. And this is gonna be called state 1. Sometimes it's also being called state A and B, but we're gonna go with 1 and 2. The starting point would be to simply move the position of something. So let's create a new oval because it's a little bit nicer to move circles around than rectangles. And let's pick a nice color for it, something like blue. Okay, and I'm gonna place it in the middle here. So the simplest animation is modifying the position of the element. So let's say we wanted to go from here to the other side of the screen. To achieve that, we need to duplicate that screen and simply on the second one, move that same object to the new position. Now what happens here is when we go to prototype, we can use those little dots here to connect the first screen to the second one and change the animation type to Smart Animate. And for now, let's keep it on click. So we're gonna be able to actually see the animation react to what we're doing. And on click, this will navigate to screen number 2. Of course, if we have more screens, we can just pick the ones that we want to go to from this list here. But we only have 2, so it's gonna go to screen 2. We're gonna talk about this part a little bit later, and then this one is the duration, which is 300 milliseconds. Let's make this a little bit slower, so I'm gonna type in 1500 milliseconds. Here is a pro tip for you. UI animations need to be short and make sense to the experience. Don't animate things just for the sake of moving parts. And now let's connect the second screen back to the first one. And once again, it's gonna be on click, it's gonna navigate to state 1, Smart Animate, ease out, and 1500. So when I click play on the top right corner here, as you can see, when I click on the artboard, the circle moves to the other position. When I click again, it moves back. So this is the most simple possible animation that you can do. Now let's explore this a little bit further. Let's choose the first state artboard and then click on those interactions here. Now let's play around with what this option here does. Basically, easing means that the animation is not linear, it doesn't go exactly at the same speed all the way, but instead it starts slower or ends up slower. So in this case, ease out means that it's gonna end up slower than it starts. So near the final point, it's gonna be slowly slowing down. And then ease in means that it starts very slowly and picks up speed. So let's see how it changes when we choose ease in for the animation one way, and then the other way actually already is ease out. Yeah, and as you can see, it started a little bit slower and then it kept going faster and faster. And this one is gonna do the opposite. When I click, it starts fast and then slows down. Exactly. You can play around with more options here, like ease in and out, which basically means that it starts slow and then picks up speed towards the half of the animation and then slows down again, and so on. And then if you go with linear, it's going to be the most boring and unrealistic kind of animation that basically goes from point A to point B at the exact same speed all the time. Let's take a look at this for a second. Yeah, that's pretty boring. We're gonna talk about some other methods here a little bit later, but let's go with bouncy, which is a predefined spring animation. And I'm gonna tell you how it works a little bit later when we create our own custom one. So when we choose bouncy, when I click, this circle is going to move to the right, but it's gonna move a little bit further than it should and then bounce back a couple of times. Just like this. But I would never go with the default settings if I were you. Always try to create a custom animation that basically works best for what you want to achieve. We only have 3 options here. The mass is how heavy the object is. Basically, the heavier it is, the bigger the inertia once it actually starts moving, so it can bounce a little bit more, and it starts to pick up the pace a little bit slower, but then it does a lot more. But keeping it around 1 is usually the best choice. And if we go with 4, as you can see, it bounces a lot more. But 1 is the sort of safest option. Then you can change the curve of it, so like how many bounces there are. And as you can see, the first bounce is the biggest one. Then it gets kind of smaller and smaller and smaller until it stops. And then the amplitude of those bounces, you can create this way. So if I bring this in like that, it's gonna start bouncing a lot faster initially, and then the bounce will be slowing down. But this effect is also a little bit too much. So it's best to actually keep the bounce to almost a minimum level, and then you can increase the length of it a little bit. So the bounce is gradual, slower, and not as prominent. Kind of like this. This is a lot nicer. If you go over 25, it's barely gonna be visible. My favorite choice is actually 1000, 20, and 1, like this. So let's create that same exact option here as well. So I'm gonna go with custom spring, and it's gonna be 1000, 20, and 1. And when I play this, you're gonna see that it bounces and then bounces back when it comes back. You can also make this effect a lot more subtle if you keep it at around 1000 milliseconds of the length, and then the stiffness is going to be a little bit less and pretty small damping like this. But whatever you prefer, and it also has to match the interface. Definitely avoid strong, heavy animations with a lot of moving parts when it's a vital element of the interface. It's better to do it gradually, not take too long, but also don't make your eyes follow something that's completely out of control. Okay, so this is our first idea here. Let's remove the circle, and now let's play with a different way of animating. So I'm gonna create a vertical rectangle, go back to design, and I'm gonna pick a different color for it, this time something more like red. And I'm gonna place it exactly in the middle. Now let's duplicate it, paste it in, and then this copy, let's rotate it 90 degrees like that. And we already have the animation, so it's gonna be a transition with a bounce effect both ways of this element rotating 90 degrees and then going back. Let's see how it looks like. Now this is quite cool, and you can do a lot of really cool stuff with it. For example, you can change a plus sign into an X. So let's do it right now. So I'm gonna duplicate this object on the first frame and rotate it 90 degrees like that. So let's start this again. I removed the other one, and let's duplicate the first one and rotate it 90 degrees. Now let's copy both of them, paste them in, and then simply rotate them all 45 degrees. That way we have a plus on that very first option, and then we have an X to close it. That's a very popular interaction. And yeah, it does exactly what we want it to. Now, once we already have this, let's try something else. Let's try to change the color. So I'm gonna go with a blue here, and I'm gonna pick hex so I can copy the color. And I'm gonna change the color of the second object here as well. So now it should both rotate and then change from this little pinkish red to blue. Let's play it and see. So we played with position, rotation, and now color. And you can of course combine all of them, so things can both move and rotate and change color, but don't go overboard, because the more different elements modify, shift, and do something, the higher cognitive load we have. So we don't want to overwhelm the user. The animations should be secondary, and they should be just a nice way to supplement your design, not to completely take over. Okay, now that we have a little bit more knowledge about the basics of animation, let's do something concrete. Let's create that classic animation of a plus sign, a floating action button plus sign, where when you click it, 2 more items appear from out of it, And you have two more options, and then of course the main one turns into an X to close it. So let's create a nice circle. I'm gonna change it to red like this, and let's have the circle 128 by 128. Now let's use the path tool to create a vertical line holding the shift key. It doesn't have to be too big. And now let's change the color to white and the thickness until it matches what we want. Let's say 8 is pretty good. Now let's duplicate it. And then over here on the right, rotate it 90 degrees. And then we can select both of them and the union. And that way we have a new shape. So this is our plus sign. But we also want the other extra icons to appear here as well. So what we want to do is to duplicate the ellipse that we have and drag it out for a second. So let's say we want those icons to appear like this. So I'm going to duplicate it one more time. And let's say this is the edge of the screen over here on the right. So basically once we click, those elements pop off on the left side, a little bit on the top side here as well. And of course you can place nice icons inside it. I'm going to add some text here and I'm going to call this one number 1. Make this a little bit bigger. And I'm going to duplicate this and call this number 2. And of course, they don't have to be the same color. So we can modify the color to something a little bit different or even blue, just so we have something that matches the red a little bit, but still is different enough. Now let's group the ellipse with the 1 and then the one with the 2. And then make sure that the one with the plus and the red one are on top of the other two groups. Now let's select everything, paste it in, and we can start animating, creating the second state. So first of all, I'm gonna rotate this 45 degrees so it turns into the X. Now let's make this darker because we want it to actually kind of fade in a little bit once it expands, but we also can make this a little bit smaller because right now when it's only an X to close it, the main two functions are the 1 and 2 buttons. So now let's grab the ellipse under the 1 item on state 1 and make it smaller too. Let's say 100 by 100, or actually we can go even smaller. We can go maybe 80 by 80 and do the same thing with this one. Just make sure that the number is still in the center. Okay, now let's move them under the element and let's move the other one under the element as well. Just make sure it's in the center here. So now when we animate it, we're gonna check it out. We're gonna see that on click, it basically bounces off from outside and rotates this element. And then on click again, it turns it back into the plus. But this animation should definitely be faster. So let's go to interactions and let's change it to 250 milliseconds. And then going back, it's going to be 250 as well. And for this, we'll actually go with a custom spring. Let's go with 500, 15, and 2. And for this one more time, custom spring, 500, 15, and 2. Okay, let's play it and see how it looks like. Okay, it's a nice bouncy animation. Then I click again and it bounces right back. We can do one more thing here to make it a little bit more interesting. Okay, one last thing for today and we're gonna start doing more complex animations next week. So let's remove everything from every artboard and let's create ourselves a Neue Brutalist button. So I'm gonna go with a nice blue here, round the corners to maybe 24. And let's add a drop shadow that has 0 blur. And it has full opacity, so it's 100. And let's say maybe 8 on the y-axis, so something like this. Let's pick the same blue that we have here, go to HSL, and then decrease the last value here. So it's like a darker shade of blue. Now let's add some text. Okay, now let's select all of them, copy, paste. And now what we want to do is go into that drop shadow and change this value of Y from 8 to 1, so it's like barely visible. And then select the button itself and pick the color from the shadow on the other button, so it gets darker once you click it. Okay, one last thing we have to do here is to remove the bounce, because it's not gonna work well with modifying border or shadow colors. It's usually gonna be breaking, so let's change this from custom spring to simply is in. And then the other one, let's change this as well. Okay, let's click and preview it. And as you can see, Figma doesn't do the best job here. So how can we achieve this effect of a nice clickable button that we want here? Well, let's do it again. This time I'm gonna duplicate this rectangle, pick the one at the bottom, and go back to design, and let's remove the shadow from it and simply pick that darker color here like that. And then I'm gonna move it down. And in here, let's remove that shadow as well. And since it was 8 points, I'm just gonna move it down so the darker rectangle is at 8. Now what we want to do is paste the same one underneath that rectangle on state 2, but then move it up 6 times. So it's around 2 points instead of 8 here. And we can keep the same color. Just make sure to remove that drop shadow effect from the second one as well. Yeah, this is what we wanted. The button clicks. And if we want to make this effect even stronger, you can pick in state 2 the bottom rectangle, the one that is our new shadow here, and make this a little bit darker. So now let's go back to state 1 and let's preview it. Yeah, that looks like the button is being pressed. This is exactly what I wanted here. So as you can see, sometimes you need to be a little bit tricky and sneaky to get around Figma's limitations, but luckily this is all just the basics of animation, and we're gonna be exploring tools that you can unleash even more creativity and you don't have to be confined by these constraints. However, even with this simple tool, you can create pretty nice effects pretty easily. And that's it for today. Subscribe to the channel down below so you don't miss another episode. And let me know in the comments what you want me to animate next. And obviously, have a beautiful day.